А який у нас таймінг по часу? До вечора можемо?
Хвилин 15-20 ми вкладаємось.
Мгм.
Там, в принципі, можемо додати.
Добре.
Не може, на 12 у нас наступний вихід, але робимо паузу.
Хорошо.
It's September 28th. Ukraine Media Center confirms starts its operation. My name is Svetlana Chaparenko. Let's start our day with a conversation about humanitarian demining. Joining us today is Ihor Bezkaravainyi, Deputy Minister of Economy of Ukraine. Mr. Ihor, good morning. Good morning. So, Ukraine is on the list of the countries most contaminated by landmines. We understand the reasons. So, what does the state and the Ministry of Economy does to mitigate the economic risks arising from that? Thank you for your question. For those who don't understand, the only reason is Russian Federation. And talking about the scale, the figures that we use is 174,000 square kilometers of potentially contaminated territory. It doesn't mean that they are contaminated consistently, but it means that every single square meter may contain a threat. What else do we know about potentially dangerous territory is that now there are about 40,000 square kilometers available for work. Is the occupied territory, the territory that does not fall under the insecurity line. It means it's in distance from of 20 kilometers from the borders of Russian Federation or from the forward edge of the battle area. So what's going on is we inspect the territories, and upon the results of inspection we identify the zones that are dangerous. They are marked, added to the relevant maps, and then the demining work starts. The role of Ministry of Economy in this process is not in training of the deminers, in technological aspects of these projects. We have the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Ministry of Defense, the State Emergency Service, who have expertise and experience in this area, even comparing with our international partners. And the role of the Ministry of Economy in this process is, in fact, the support of State Emergency Service, the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Internal Affairs in management information, cooperation with the international partners, updating of standards, amendment of standards, adding new experience, because the international standards that we use now, or that the international community uses, are the conservative documents based on the experience obtained during the wars and conflicts that existed before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russian Federation. And as a result of this big war, we have a lot of new things coming, new things in sense of application of technologies and approaches. We have a lot of types of weapons and arms, and there is a high intensity of use of such types of weapons and ammunition. And due to those reasons, we may be considered, well, no one has done such analytics before, but we may be considered one of the countries most contaminated with the landmines in the world. Well, you've mentioned the new technologies, new instruments for demining. Could you give us more detail about such instruments? Maybe some of them are Ukrainian developments, and what do we take from international experience? Well, from international experience, we take the rules that we use in demining, that the mining units use, and prioritization rules. Talking about prioritization, it means that the first thing to demine is the critical infrastructure, to arrange coordination with the liberated territories. I mean, the pump station, roads, gas pipelines, waterways, stuff like that. The second in priority is the safety and security of population. I mean, the residential areas, the facilities that provide utility services to the people. And third in priority are economically active territories like agricultural lands, the industrial facilities like plants, factories, and so on and so forth. Also, what we take from international experience is the handling rules and with the rules of handling with the mines. And if we talk about the novels that we have based upon the demining process in Ukraine, here we're talking about the means of identification of ordnance and the systems of remote scanning. And if we go into technical details before we proceed to demining, we need to inspect the territory and to understand where the hazardous items may be located. It's done by gathering information, and now we're trying to move into the technological directions and to use the remote scanning of the land surface. This is where we use drones that identify hazardous items on top or on the or under the surface of the ground. Then we get the massive of data that should be analyzed by a powerful software to understand how is that item different from other identified items, whether it's an unexploded ordnance or is just a piece of steel. This is something that was never used in the world before, and the attention of international community is now drawn to the search of such technologies in Ukraine, because currently, unfortunately, we can only be offered the probes, the shovels, and a lot of qualified personnel. But using those traditional methods, traditional approaches, the duration of inspection and duration of demining process may be extremely long. So can you give us the exact numbers? To what extent such digitalization expedites the process of demining? Well, such figure does not exist, whether it's 10, 100 times or 50, 100 times, because the technology is just nascent. It's not yet finalized. There are different types of scanners that provide different efficiency under different conditions. Our main task today in Ukraine is to develop a universal tool that would provide for efficient result, equally efficient. Here we remove the human factor, we remove the factor of error, we make the access to the territory available faster, but I cannot give you the exact figure now. Now there is the national mine activity strategy in development. What is the role of the ministry in this process, and when this process is about to be finalized? Well, according to the law on mine activity, the Secretariat of the National Body for Mine Activity, which is the structural unit of the Ministry of Defense, is the unit that leads the demining process. But given the challenges faced by the Ministry of Defense now is the Ministry of Economy, which heads the process. Our task is to gather the experts around the table, to arrange their thoughts, to filter them, and to provide the framework which would give us the answer to the questions who, when, does what, under which conditions, to make sure that we have understanding here inside of Ukraine. And then there is understanding required by our international partners who want to support us in our demining efforts, but basically they may not have fundamental documents regardless of that. Talking about the terms, there is a wide expert discussion of this document to be going on next week. More than 80 experts, both Ukrainian and international, will be involved in this process. Then the project of the strategy will be presented in the International Donor Conference on Mine Action in Zagreb, and we expect this already official document to be adopted by the end of the year. We expect to see its adoption in December. Well, international support, how important it is in the demining process, what are the tools that we have already received, and what do we still expect to receive? Well, international support is extremely important. I'm real happy we have it, because without international support we would feel it way more difficult to do things, and the majority of the resources coming to Ukraine are the support of our government bodies, such as State Emergency Service, our Ministry of Internal Affairs. We get training, we get technologies, we get equipment that ensures the proper and safe operation of the mining units. This support comes for the needs of humanitarian demining or for civil needs, because we don't talk about military demining now. We don't talk about demining during counteroffensive. All the efforts are aimed at humanitarian demining. Another part of funding goes for operation of mine action operators who work in the fields. Now there are 17 certified companies who have permit to work in demining area in Ukraine. If I'm not mistaken, there are 29 more, certification of which is underway, and soon they will be allowed to work in the field. And about 40 more companies, according to our information, are gathering documents for certification. They get familiarized with the procedures, they import the material, and so on and so forth. So for the next season, we expect to see a significant increase of the number of mine activity operators which are not government controlled. They will be the private organizations involved in demining. The demining machinery expedites the demining process, as we've heard just now. So does Ukraine have such an opportunity to manufacture demining machinery? Well, yes, machinery is needed. It's needed in big numbers, and talking about that, we don't talk about these big machines that grind the soil along with the mines. The range is extremely broad, but talking about the key items or key articles, here we're talking about the protective equipment, metal detectors, so to say, the consumables, and then it's the vehicles for transportation of personnel like pickups or microbuses. Then there is a special material for transportation of unexploded devices that need to be loaded into armored cabins that protect the crew and protects them against detonation. And another article are the mechanized vehicles that expedite the demining of extensive territories, and we need them in big numbers as well. So those machines are not panacea. So conditionally speaking, if we make up a fleet of 1,000 cars, it doesn't mean we demine everything, because such machines can be used in open areas and in, for example, city conditions, urban conditions. We won't be able to use such material. We will have to resort to traditional human labor. So yes, machinery expedites the process. We need it in different types and numbers. And talking about the manufacturing in Ukraine, we can cover that need just partially. We can cover the need on first three articles, because we manufacture pickup trucks, we manufacture the machinery for transportation of unexploded ordnance. But talking about the other processes, there is localization of manufacturing processes. We have agreement signed with 3 companies on localization. There are 2 more companies in negotiations, and those negotiations will be supported by the documents shortly. So yes, now we're getting the manufacturing capacity, we're expanding the manufacturing capacity, and the role of Ministry of Economy in this context is to assist with localization and to work with international partners whom we orient to procurement of this machinery in Ukraine, the Ukrainian manufactured machinery, because first it launches the manufacturing lines, it helps the economy to work, is the taxes, is the jobs, and if we talk about the material itself, it keeps breaking because it works under dangerous conditions, it requires quick maintenance, it requires a significant number of spare parts, and if it all happens in Ukraine, this expensive material will keep working and not just stay somewhere in the field as a result of a break. Let's give our colleagues the opportunity to ask the questions. Well, Vladislav Obuch, Ukrinform, you've touched upon that issue on top of the national mine action strategy. What is still to be done for Ukraine? Ukraine has already changed the conditions for certification, for example, and how to stimulate the arrival of bigger number of international operators and to ensure the emergence of Ukrainian mine activity operators, and, for example, to stimulate the agricultural holdings to take responsibility for part of those works. I know that some of them get certified for demining already. Well, there's a lot of questions actually, but talking about the work with the regulatory documents that regulate the activity of mine operators, we aspire to making their work more simple, not easier, but more simple. The majority of mine action operators, they complain for a lot of regulations in this process. Many say that this is how it's supposed to be because it's a risky work. But the biggest questions here are about the language of those documents, the lack of understanding by the operators, like ambiguous wordings in the regulations. And the main task in this area is to standardize the certification approaches to make sure that it's the standardized process and the certification centers use the same approach, because now it's different. The next step is to try to make these procedures simpler so it's easier to read it. And talking about the stimulation of agricultural holdings to clear their own territories, unfortunately, or no, fortunately, we don't do anything to stimulate the agrarians because it's the mine action operators who are supposed to work in this area. But the next year we have a 2 billion subsidies budget to compensate the expenses for clearance of territories. And the idea is to have the offer submitted to the agricultural holding by the operator of mine activity on a transparent basis. Then the territory is being cleared and the expenses are being compensated from that government program. First, it will support the agrarians to clear their territories, and it will be the signal to the market that is about to be launched, and the market will understand that there are preconditions for such a competition. Well, if I've forgotten something, well, you've answered almost all of it, but how can we stimulate the emergence of a new mine activity operators in Ukraine? Is it the certification or the absence of equipment or something else, or maybe the existence of the market itself will become a stimulus and the business will get interested in such a market? Well, first of all, yeah, it's the market itself. The money will appear here and it will self-organize. Our task is not to regulate, but rather to moderate this process. We need to retain some healthy regulations which are related to the safety and security of the people and guarantee of the high quality works, but it should not push the companies away from Ukraine. However, the main premise for this, the main market precondition is understanding of who orders the service and who funds the service. We understand that those who procure the service are the agricultural companies who want to demine their areas to enter the new agricultural season, and the source of funding is the signal from the government about creation of this program. And the service providers, they already exist, they just need a little stimulus to come and work. Thank you very much, Mr. Ihor, for your comprehensive answers. I'm reminding you, joining us was Ihor Karavainy, Deputy Minister of Economy of Ukraine, and Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform will continue its operation at 12 o'clock, and we will talk about the situation in Kherson region. Stay tuned.